And welcome. We're here for another rapid reaction on the Heron Outlet YouTube channel. I'm joined by Alex Winley. Andres, the producer, is in the back. Obviously, I'm Austin Robillard. Welcome in, guys. Another unfortunate loss for Inter Miami. This makes it 3 in a row now since their 0-0 draw to Chicago at home. Winless in 4 games, very reminiscent of the 2020 season. Remember those 5 losses in a row in that season? Man, really rough start to the season so far. And Miami have, as Phil Neville would say, an S word load of work to do. There's a lot of work to be done for Inter Miami, and it was very, very evident that the work that they've been putting in thus far has not fully panned out, and there's a lot to work on. And I know that Alex and I have a lot of agreements on this game with what went on, and there was a lot to really dislike. The first half was abysmal. If it wasn't for the penalty, then I don't think that Miami would have ever really had a chance in this game. They just never really put a stamp on it at all. But let's just start with I guess the first half, because I guess they did grow to the game a little bit, but not so much. But let's start with the first half, Alex. What did you see from Miami in this 3-1 loss to Cincinnati in the first 45 minutes, and what went wrong?
Of just a lack of real conviction with their passing. It's just been a recurring theme under Neville. They just can't play out of the back for some reason, and because of that, they'll just punt the ball up long, and then the cycle starts all over again. And with the game against Cincinnati, we saw that. Yeah, it just looked bad. Miami came in playing their same old style of football. Very 4-4-2, Eagle Ames trying to get on the ball, but it's not working, and it's just not working. I know there's this romanticized idea about Eagle as a playmaker, but he's just not. He's not quick enough for that anymore. He's not. He that's he's not good enough for that anymore. You look at Luciano Acosta on the opposite side. He was constantly moving. One touch passing. He was trying to find his teammates and through. But Higuain, he takes on too much, and then when he fails at it, he goes and just throws his arm up in the air and just is not very encouraging in that regard. And MLS is a league where you need younger, faster, quicker players. And right now, Miami got part of that right, but their DPs, only one of them now. They're not delivering, and of course, not only that, the tactics they don't suit what the players that they have. There's a lot of good, quick technically good players that can play a really possession based style if a coach implements it. But right now, it's the same old, launch it long, play hard, but there's not enough, tactical, passing pattern input in what Miami's doing, and we saw that against Cincinnati.
If you had to take a guess, because I have actually been giving some of the passing metrics numbers by the club, if you had to guess where Higuain or to what player Higuain completed most of his passes to in this match over any other player, who would you think that it was, and who do you think it? All right, let me start with this: who do you think it should be, and who do you think it was?
Should be Campana, probably a defender, maybe Kieran Gibbs.
It was actually Christopher McVeigh.
Ah,
He
close.
completed 4 passes to Christopher McVeigh in this match, and that's more than any other player that he completed passes to, which for me is more than enough to tell anybody that there's something wrong with your creative playmaker. I thought that in the first half too with Higuain, and I'm obviously not pinning this whole performance on him, but because it definitely was a team effort in this loss, I must say this whole team just looks dysfunctional at the moment. But with Higuain, the passes going to McVeigh for the most part had to do with this sort of dropping in that was almost getting too deep, in my opinion, into which it looked like a 4-5-1, like a flat 4-5-1, especially in the defensive when they were defending. And I think that could be an issue because of his lack of pace at his age to get up the pitch in transition. That's just it's very simple to point out, and I saw a lot of that in the first 45 minutes. And another thing that I noted out on my Twitter, you know, the game at the end of the day was a 50-50 split in possession. But over 60% of the completed passes between both sides in the match were in Miami's half.
Mm.
And that's an issue. That's an issue, and that tells you that Miami, even with possession, they're not able to push the ball forward. They're not able to threaten. I think there were only 2 shots on goal in the match. One of them coming from obviously the penalty kick. The other one was Gregory late in the game. There's huge issues in terms of chance creation, and I'm really not sure what options Phil Neville has at the moment. Right, like I'm not sure. It's they've tried 2 systems now. It has to come down to personnel at the moment. But if you're going to take Higuain off the pitch, where do you go? I mean, we've talked about the Georgia Costas, Bryce Duke coming back from injury. Do you play just a 4-3-3, right, and just have 2 wingers and an attacker, look more like a an LAFC kind of? I mean, there's different ways to do it, but it would require dropping a DP. And I think at the moment that's a realistic possibility. I mean, we saw it against LAFC. He took him right out of the match, and that it seemed to not necessarily have a positive impact, but it changed the way the game was played. And I think that has to be a conversation to be had in the locker room and with the front office and with the coaching staff, because it's something that needs to be addressed. But overall, as a team, it's not like Mo Adams and Gregory were advancing the ball. Their passing between them two is never ever good. I think up and down the wings, Robert Taylor is still. I think you can still notice a little bit of a fitness kind of thing with him. Granted, he did go. He went 90 minutes today, if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember him being subbed off, so I'm pretty sure he went 90 minutes. But
Yeah,
at that point, it seemed like
he won a
he
full
was,
90.
yeah. It just he didn't put his mark on the game as he would have liked. John Mota out on the wing. Sometimes these these long shots from outside the box are tiring. I mean, I granted he's probably going to score one by the end of the year, sure. But to give up your transition offense to a shot like that at times just seems to be so pointless. And I think Alvis Powell did it twice. And if Alvis Powell was doing that on Miami in 2020, and he probably was, we weren't really happy about it. So there's just a lot to be said. But I guess defensively is now the question too. He gave up 3 goals. All 3 goals, as Phil Neville quoted in his press conference, came from a cross, actually. Um, what kind of an issue does that serve for the back line? And I know that we saw the insertion of Damian Lowe last week. It seemed like it was a much better performance. They didn't really give up anything from open play in the LAFC match. So what went wrong defensively today? We spoke about it a little bit a Twitter space, but what went wrong defensively for you? And do you give any sort of criticism to Damian Lowe today because of kind of what happened later on in the match? Although they didn't score the penalty, there were times where it seemed like after he went down with an injury, he just was a little bit more sluggish than he ever is. He's never usually like that. There were times later on in the match where it seemed like his fitness was diminishing.
Yeah, I think defensively, it's an entire system issue. I won't pin it on one player. It's when you don't defense starts from the front, and I've talked about this. When you have one player that you not that good of a presser, you tend to uh suit your tactics around him, which Miami has done. They don't necessarily press as much, and because of that, teams are able to progress the ball a bit more comfortably, and you have more chances on goal basically. So I think it's an entire system issue really. Defense is just not one player. The entire, especially in modern day soccer, the entire team needs to defend. So I won't pin it on one player, but yeah, it's just as a whole, Miami's just not playing well. I won't, yeah, Lowell gave away a penalty, but at the same time, it really looked like it was an act of desperation, honestly. I don't think it was like something that he'll normally do. It's more so of like, okay, I don't want to concede another goal. Let me just put it all on my line right, all on the line right here, and let me fly into this tackle, which is not a good thing to do. And I'm sure that Neville has told him about that. And Damian Love's a smart guy, smart soccer player, so he probably won't do it again. But yeah, as a whole, I think yeah, defensively, it's tricky because Miami has to find that balance between defense and that midfield spine. Let's say if you have one midfielder dropping deep between the two center backs. That necessarily may not happen, and he'll have numbers back in order to do that. But since Miami was looking for a goal, of course they're going to push their two central midfielders up, and that in turn leaves space in behind. So that's probably why Cincinnati were able to have a field day. So yeah, it's really back to the drawing board for Miami. I don't know if they'll switch formations. It doesn't look likely. They tried a back three, no, back to a flat back four. Like you said, maybe a 4-3-3. But where does that creativity come from? Just a lot of questions for Inter Miami right now, and it's not looking any better for them, really.
Yeah, I think that's I guess there were talks in the off season about bringing in a true 10, and the fact that that failed to come into fruition kind of is leaving its mark on the team at the moment. It just seems like there's a real need for a true playmaker in a prime age, and a lot of successful MLS teams have one of those. If I'm not mistaken. Now, honestly, I did think I know Brandon Vasquez had a really good game today, but Luciano Acosta also had a good game. He didn't score the penalty, but uh, a good game. Helping the Cincinnati attack, just being able to possess the ball in Miami's half. And that's something that's extremely important. It's something that we see from tens all around the league, and I think that that's something that Miami has to think about. Um, but moving on, I wanted to, I guess, get on a lighter side here because we can talk negatives about what happened in the match today and what's been happening all year. But I guess is there any optimistic thoughts that you have they given you any signs that there's reason for you to believe that this team could be successful? Or I mean, you go back to 2020 and they lost the first 5 games, still made the playoffs. Granted, it was an expanded playoffs, but they still did. And there's 30 games left. 30 games left. Do we buckle it in now and say, yep, this is going to be a long season? Or do we say, you know what, this team still does need time? They've not had a fully fit team in the first 4 games. Granted, probably not many MLS teams have, but granted, you're down to a third string keeper in this match. Kieran Gibbs just came off injury. Um, and you look at those things and the factors that they've played in the first 4 matches down the stretch in the summer. If this team fortunately gets healthy, can there be success? And if there is a possibility for it, how do they find it?
Honestly, I don't think so. I think it's just there are so many concerning trends with this team that I don't really see getting better unless some drastic tactical thing happens. Just players running into each other, just not enough shots on target, not enough players getting into the box, and you can scream and then talk about playing harder and whatnot, but you need a system to put players in that correct position, and it's not just about individual brilliance. Sometimes Miami, they don't have DPs except for Higuain. Sometimes the system needs to be the DP in a way, and to get your players into those correct positions. But right now, it doesn't look likely, and I tweeted about it looking at the schedule coming up. It's gonna get ugly. They got Houston at home, New England, and they're at Seattle versus Atlanta, and then at New England again. It's likely that they probably go winless in April unless something crazy happens, unless you know they come back from the break and then they buckle down and just try to grind out a win. But it's not looking good. Cincinnati, they're not even necessarily a team that of world beaters. So the fact that they were able to lose 3-1 to them, it's kudos to Cincinnati. They have been playing well. Like I said, they're not world beaters, but they look like a cohesive squad now. But it's yeah, I say it is a bit concerning, and hopefully injuries will do help them a little bit, but at the same time, it's just a style of play. It's not cohesive enough to get the best out of some of these players, really.
And I guess I'm going to ask you the hard question now. Does that come down to coaching? Um, because I mean, it's 4 games in, and I'm never going to be at the point 4 games into a season to say anything about a manager, especially given the sanctions and the all the new debuts and everything like that. But this coaching staff needs to, in the nicest words, get a grip on this team and understand the reality of the situation that they're being forced to deal with. and I guess kind of figure things out, because there's a lot wrong, and we've talked about the tactics and why, how come this team in its history has never just looked like a cohesive unit? Why can't that happen? And it doesn't look like there's any promising signs, as you just mentioned, for them to have that this season. And if they don't have that this season, by the end of the season, it is a coaching issue. What do you say to that? And how, I guess, short of a leash does anyone, including Phil Neville, have on this coaching staff?
I think it's. I will say I don't know. It is a bit too early. Yes, 4 games in, but this has been there's just concerning trends that it's not just a player issue anymore. It's just a lot of the times you see on the field players raising their arms, asking, "Oh, where are you?" That can be fixed by going over film, using advanced stats to put players in the right position. Just things of that nature. I think at the beginning of the season, Jorge Mas and David Beckham said, despite the sanctions, they do want to remain competitive. And right now, winless in 4 games, and it's probably going to get worse with their upcoming schedule. Yes, you do start to ask some questions, and it's MLS and anything can happen. But there are some trends that are a bit concerning. Maybe they get it together, but right now it's just not good enough. Neville even said it himself. Mo Adams, post game conference, he said it's not good enough, and they're just gonna have to do better. But you know, yeah, it's just tough, and you don't want to call for anyone's job to be lost. But soccer is such a results business, and you don't win, and questions start to get asked. So it's unfortunate, but you got to start looking at tactical setup now, and Miami has gotten so many more better, not better, but they've gotten more players in that fit what the club wants to do. And right now they're still giving 2021 results in regards of players just not being cohesive. So yeah, it's tricky, but yeah, I think you got to start asking some questions now about whether or not this tactical setup is the correct one.
With all that said, Miami take on Houston Dynamo after the international break on April 9th at Drive Pink Stadium. So they'll be coming back home to another, I guess, weaker opponent, if you want to call it that, in Houston. But as you saw today with Cincinnati in the 3-1 loss, not really sure if we should even use that as any kind of a storyline, because it seems like Miami at this point are going to be the underdogs going into this one. But, as everyone I'm sure hopes, the results could get better there. They need to start there. Me and you both talked about how in the first 5 games there were opportunities to win points, start off the season strong, and they've failed to do that. And this is the 5th game coming up before this crazy stretch, as you mentioned. That is going to get really tough for this team. So hopefully after the international break, they can regroup and figure things out, and hopefully get 3 points at home um, against Houston Dynamo. But a 3-1 loss in Cincinnati on the day. This was the Heron Outlet and our rapid reaction for our producer, Andres, Ian, who isn't here, unfortunately, and Alex, and myself, Austin Robillard. We will see you guys next week.